Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I was looking at the forecast for the Texas game, and it was like in the 90s and going to be sunny and humid, and it's like, that seems really hot. It's like 70 degrees in Columbus right now. Can they just play the game in Columbus again this year? That is my question.
You know, without asking, you won't know the response. So
shoot your shot.
Shoot your shot. There you go. We are here. Just got done talking with Ryan Day on Monday for the latest update on everything going wrong. Oh, geez.
Ohio State football, things are fine. Don't listen to Tony.
Going around the program. And so right here, we're going to talk about some depth chart position battles going on. I'll get there, Tom. I'm sorry.
Going to move you to backup host.
Wow. Let's start at quarterback, a backup quarterback specifically. Last time we talked to Brian Day, which is after last Saturday's scrimmage, he said that Luke Fahey was pushing Tavien St. Clair. Today, he said the competition's still ongoing. They're not in game prep week yet, so they still want to see like one more week of how things go. And really, this is going to be a situation where Tavien St. Clair has to win back the job that he lost because he had it before camp started.
Right. And I think the most interesting part of that answer was Day talked about the fact that they were thinking about giving both of those guys, both Tavien St. Clair and Luke Fahey, reps with the ones, which to me, that tells me this really, this is not just a thing you're sort of like, we'll get to position battles that might not be real position battles a little later on in the show. This one to me, I heard that and I kind of went, yeah, this is like a real position battle because you're close enough that, Ball State's 11 days away or whatever it is. Texas is under 2 weeks away and you're in Austin. So you're not wasting reps to make people feel good and important. You are spending reps if you feel it is a real question. And it feels like it's a real question because, the number two guy is the number two guy, and that's fine. But if something happens to the number one guy, they have to know, okay, what does it look like with this guy under fire from the first team defense, playing with the first team offense? That was, not jarring to me because we've been having all the conversations on the board that we have been for the last little while, but that was still pretty telling to me.
Yeah, and once game week gets going, that's when the backup has to be known because they're going to be running the Ohio State offense, the game plan that week for Ball State. And you can scoff at Ball State if you want, but it's like this is the process. This is the beginning of the process. This is the backup's job to know what the game plan is that week and to prepare for it, to get more of a look than the third string quarterback. So that's why this week here is going to be so big for both guys, and really it could be really big for the program as a whole this season. You mentioned kind of like the idea of being game ready. I asked Brian about the number of receivers that would be playing in matchup games because I didn't want to say who's playing against Texas,
right? Because
we're looking at Ball State. But I did ask how many of the receivers would be playing in a matchup game, and he said 6. So like, there's no position battles necessarily there because it's just it's known. There's rotation. He did say Kyle Parker's still not back, so that's something to watch. But overall, like no surprises there based on what we did here. Although he did want to mention, don't forget about Phillip Bell and Des Jones.
Yeah, because you're sort of, part of your question was, is it the 4 veterans, which is Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Inniss, Devin McEwen, Kyle Parker, plus the 2 freshmen, Chris Henry Jr. and Brock Boyd. And he said yes, but. And so, at that point, we've been talking about the fact that Des Jones in particular has had a really good camp, Phillip Bell as well. If Kyle Parker, at this point, you have to assume Kyle Parker is far enough behind that he's probably not going to be ready to play a meaningful role week 1, maybe week 2, depending on how soon he really does get back. Then all of a sudden you have Des Jones, you have Phillip Bell like legitimately in that top 6 conversation.
Yeah, and then tight ends, he said he's got they're comfortable 3 with Mason Williams, Nate Roberts, and Bennett Christian in whichever order, depending on what they're going to do and what they're going to employ. So that's something we've been talking about on. I think we've been talking about it. I assume we've also been talking about it on the Buckeye Insiders message board. But to shift further inside, the real news, I guess, of the day is there's no news on the offensive line except for the fact that Austin Siereveld continues to work at right guard and Ian Moore continues to work at left tackle, and they feel good about it, and that's the way things are trending. But it's not set yet, Tom.
Right. That was one where, there are years where you come out of spring ball and it's like, who's going to be the starting quarterback? Is it going to be Justin Fields? Is it going to be Gunnar Hoke? It could be literally anyone. And this has been one that has every indication we have gotten behind the scenes, every indication you have gotten from doing Instagram picture detective, every indication you have gotten from talking to other players and the order in which names get said and the combination in which names get said. Every indication so far has been, yes, it's going to be Ian Moore at left tackle, Austin Siereveld at right guard. It's a little unusual to move a guy from who was your starting left tackle and a very good starting left tackle last year to your right guard, but every indication is still that that's happening. But he does, he's not ready to completely commit to that yet. But this is one of those where, barring an injury, I would be gobsmacked to not see that be the starting offensive line game one. Yeah,
because one of the things he said is they love that interior of Luke Montgomery, Carson Hinsman, and Austin Siereveld, but the tackles need to play well. And he said they have.
Right, yeah.
So everything is coming up Millhouse right now for the offensive line, but you're right, the health needs to stay there. To the other side of the ball, and at the back of the other side of the ball on the secondary, Terry Moore and Leroy Roker were asked about in terms of their role in the defense right now, and I thought it was interesting because Ryan said, well, Jalen McClain, he's the incumbent, he's the starter. Earl Little's going to do some things, Earl Little's going to play, but Terry Moore and Leroy Roker will roll in. And then also talking about the nickel situation with Jay Timmons, and I think Simeon Caldwell's name was mentioned as well. Like, these guys are all going to roll in, and I think it goes back to the packaging that Matt Patricia's talked about, that we've talked about, that there's roles for all of these guys. So it will be interesting to see how those guys are utilized. But what did you think when you heard, like, oh, Terry Moore, there's still a plan for him?
Yeah, I'm sure they're going to play those guys. What's your takeaway on that? How many snaps are Terry Moore and Leroy Roker going to play against Texas? Is it, I'll set the over-under at 5.5.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that's a pretty good number because it's like, well, is it the 3rd and 19s? How many are there? Is it where you're doing that? Or will there be situations where Terry Moore or Leroy Roker is one of the 5 standard? And he said, it'll depend on nickel and base, like, is there ever a situation where one of those two guys is in the 4-man secondary? The way, nothing we've seen suggests that there will be, other than Ryan Day saying, well, we're going to roll guys in there. I don't think it's a true rolling. I think it's a situational rolling. I would take the under on 1.
Yeah, it just feels like a lot of that press conference was, and don't forget about, and hey, we also are looking at, and also this guy, which you're still a couple weeks from the start of the season. You want to keep people engaged. You want to keep people, because a lot of these guys are one snap away from being all of a sudden, then now you are the guy, and it's a lot more than just rolling. So I think some of that was probably a little bit of personnel management that he was doing, more so than like real legitimate, in some cases, yes, in some cases, less so. I'm probably taking the under on both of those guys outside of, because I think at worst I'm going to break even. Right. I don't think you're going to see both of those guys. Maybe I'm wrong. That's a possibility, because it does seem like this is something where they're legitimately still trying to figure out, okay, where does a Simeon Caldwell fit versus a Leroy Roker versus a Terry Moore? Because these are all guys that could, they're probably going to have slightly different roles, but with different combinations of guys, it could be any of them. I tend to think that when we're hearing some of the same stuff in there that we've been hearing behind the scenes for a while, I tend to think, okay, there's probably, I would bet on more snaps for Simeon Caldwell than, at least one and maybe both of those guys.
Yeah, because it's interesting because of the employment, the usage of Simeon Caldwell being like a big nickel, dime linebacker type, as opposed to Moore or Leroy Roker, who are going to just be your standard kind of free safety.
Right.
And what they're replacing is Jalen McClain, or they're playing alongside. And it's like, Well, that's not something you're generally going to do. You're not going to replace Jalen McLean in the defense, but is there a spot alongside them? And then that means Earl Little is doing some other stuff, which is what the nickel and dime situation comes into play for. But still things they've got to work out there. The last thing that I have, he did mention 6 defensive tackles, which I thought was very interesting. And maybe you and Jack will talk about this on the morning show. But the 5 that we know of James Smith, Edric Houston, Jason Moore, Will Smith, and John Walker. And then he threw Damari Simeon's name in there, true freshman, who we've talked about on this show since the spring as being somebody that we've been impressed with. And so I just thought that was a nice little, okay, there's one more guy in that group. And maybe he can be Jarquez Carter from last year when he was on the verge of breaking into that top 5 situation.
Well, I'm going to bring this full circle. Mention the weather in Austin off the top of the show. And mention the weather in Austin again, because this is not going to be a game where, that is not 300-pound dude weather, like not even a little bit. So you're going to need to play at least 4, probably more guys on the interior of that defensive line. And you figured certainly Jason Moore would be 5, and it was kind of like, okay, if they had to play a 6th guy, who would it be? And Damari Simeon would probably have been the name that we would have given you as a possibility. But, this is, again, we do these reading the tea leaves things. It's not that Damari Simeon was asked about. It wasn't, hey, how was Damari Simeon? He was brought up, more or less unsolicited in conjunction with that. That tells you, okay, they really are thinking about him as someone who's going to be playing that kind of role.
When the head coach, who is an offensive coach, sometimes just allows the defense to do what they want to do, is able to go down and freely mention the 6th defensive tackle, because there are times where you see head coach is struggling with a name. Like he even did it today, trying to remember somebody, and I'm also struggling to remember it. But I remember Urban one year struggling to remember Joshua Perry. Just somebody down the depth chart. Like you wanna mention him, but like he was boom, 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 and I thought that was interesting for the 6th defensive tackle to be right there on the tip of the head coach's tongue. That's just something to keep in mind down the road. Another thing to keep in mind is that you can find us over at BuckeyeInsiders.com. Got a bunch of people signing up. Would love to see you guys there. Thank you for all of those who've been watching and then coming over to sign up and letting us know. We appreciate that. As we say, it is the absolute best way to support what we do. Hitting the thumbs up, commenting on these videos is also a great way to support, and helps, everybody knows, helps the algorithm. And we must all bow down to Lord Algorithm. But that will do it from here. I want to thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.